Hi Grade 10, welcome to the biology class lecture 2. Today we are going to start a new chapter 20, that is organisms and their environment, and we will cover two topics, ecology and energy flow. One important way of studying living things is to study them where they live. Animals and plants are affected by their surroundings or environments and never live in complete isolation. So the study of interaction between the living organism and the environment is called as ecology. There are many levels of ecology. The four important ones are habitat, population, community, and ecosystem. If we talk about environment, they are all the conditions that surrounds a living organism. Habitat is the place where an organism lives. For example, fish lives in sea. Population, all the members of a single species that lives in a habitat. For example, if we take an example of us, we are one population, the human. With us, there is another population in our area, that is cat. We have plants, etc. So what is community is all the populations of different organisms that live together in a habitat. So we as human and the cats another population and the dog as another population all together makes one community. And all these together, the communities and the habitat, makes an ecosystem. These are different examples of ecosystem: grassland, desert, mountains, etc. So they all have their own population and communities. If we consider a pond as an example of an ecosystem, we see that here the pond is a habitat, while population, for example, we have many tadpoles as one population. We have snails as another, plants as another population. So all these populations, tadpoles, plants, snails and others, together makes a community. And all these communities, the inhabitants and the pond, the habitat, makes up an ecosystem. So when these living organisms live in an ecosystem, then obviously they eat and respire, which increase and decrease the energy level. So we call this increase and decrease of their energy intake as energy flow. So all the organisms need energy, which they get from the food by respiration. And in an ecosystem, the energy originates from the sun. How and why, that we will discuss in the food chain and the food web, because what is a food chain is the diagram that shows the flow of energy from one organism to the next, while food web is the network of the interconnected food chains. But before going in detail, let's have a look into some types of organisms. We have producers and consumers. Producers we call the organisms that get their food and energy from the sun directly, and they are always the plants that makes their food with the help of photosynthesis. While consumers are the animals that eat other organisms. If they eat only the plants, they are primary consumers. If they are eating the primary consumers, they are secondary consumers. And if they are eating the secondary consumers, they are called as tertiary consumers. So according to this classification, herbivores, carnivores and omnivores, the animals that eat only plants are the herbivores, that is sheep and zebra. So in this category, the primary consumers are usually the herbivores because they only eat plants. Omnivores are the animals that eat both plants and animals. For example, chicken, hedgehog and fox, even the human, because we also eat vegetables, fruits, herbs, and even chicken and other meat. So according to this, the secondary consumers can be omnivores as well as herbivores. And the carnivores are the animals that only eat other animals. So they are lion, tiger, vultures, spiders, and usually the tertiary consumers falls in the category of carnivores. Now have a look at the food chain, the sequence that shows the flow of energy. So just notice this thing that all the food chain, either it's 3 linked, 4 linked or 5 linked depending on the number of consumers, but all of them have one thing common, that is the producer. All the food chain starts with the producer, and there is only one producer in each food chain. Okay, so the first thing which we draw in the food chain is the producer, a plant. The second is always the primary consumer, a herbivore that eats the plant. Sometimes it's a omnivore also, but usually it's a primary consumer is a herbivore, but not always. Then so on, secondary and tertiary, depending on what they eat. This is also an example of one of the food chain. Flower is the producer, caterpillar primary consumer, frog secondary, snake tertiary, and owl quaternary. This is an example of a food web which we draw the same way we do as in the food chain, that is starting from the producer. We have primary consumer, secondary, tertiary, quaternary, but all these food chains are interconnected in the form of a network. So in this way we can say from one food web we can separate out so many food chains. From this one we have corn as producer, grasshopper primary consumer, frog secondary, and so on. Similarly, we have mangoes as a producer, fruit fly as primary consumer, then we have frog as secondary consumer, eagle as tertiary consumer. So this